In this lesson, I want to add in some PHP content into our web format. So with PHP, it gives us the ability to pick up form information. It also allows us to run some scripting behind the scenes, and we're going to use this to ensure that our form content is coming from our website. It's going to add some added security. So let's scroll up to the top of our page, and if you are passing over to a different file, so if you're not going to index.php, you've got to remember to include the session start at the start of each and every one of the PHP files. So we still need to keep that session here on index, even if we are passing it to contact.php. So that's just an important note that the session needs to be started, and this is the first thing that we do within PHP. We start our session, and essentially a session allows us to track this particular user's interaction. We're able to pass in some values and some variables into it and utilize it within our backend coding, and essentially in this case we're going to be using it to make sure that we do have some added security into our form. So the next thing, so session start, so this is all PHP code, and if you're not familiar with PHP code, we're just going to be touching some PHP code very lightly here. We're going to be working with sessions as well as variables, and then we've got some conditional statements, and then the mail option that's available within PHP. So I am going to try to explain as much as possible as we go through the different steps to set this up. And of course, if you're not familiar with PHP, you can just copy and paste the source code in and try out just the different values here, just to see that the way that it works, and also customize it to your web projects. So what we want to do, so now that we've started the session, we want to take a look and we want to see if this session is actually up and running. So sessions allow us to hold values and variables. So let's create a check to see if there's already a value within the session, and if there is, then we're going to continue and keep that output value, and if there isn't, then we're going to generate a value for the session. So essentially what this statement is going to do, it's going to check to see if it's existing, and if it's not existing, then we're going to generate one. So there's some options here for session. So this is how we specify session, and each session we can have set of unique variables that we're passing within the session. So we can give this one a name, and essentially it's going to check if this is going to exist. So let's we're going to create a formula here with a random value. So let's create a session, and we're going to call it, maybe we can call it SEC value, or for security value, or so on. And so this is similar to JavaScript. If you're familiar with JavaScript, so we set the condition, and then we've got these curly brackets here, and we place the condition. So if this is true, then we're going to skip over this. If it's false, if there's no sec value, then we're going to set one. So first of all, let's create that session value, and we need a variable to hold that value. So we're just going to have one, we'll call it holder, and here we're going to create that actual value that we want to use. And there's one thing here that we need to note, that we're going to actually need two values that we're going to have to output. So we're going to do a mathematical formula, we're going to do an a plus b, and we need to pass over that value of c. So let's take a look at this, and so we've got a holder. We can maybe call it value a and give it a random assigned value. So this is going to give us a random number anywhere from 0 to 50. And b, we'll do the same thing here, and this is going to give us the same thing, a different random value from 0 to 50. And then what we want to do is we want to actually place them within the session. So let's set a session value of, and this is how we set session values. So session value, and it's the same thing that we did up here where we checked for it. So let's set a session value for a, and we're going to equal it to whatever's contained within a. So of course you can shorten this, and you can just kind of skip over and place the random in there. But just for the purposes of learning, we're just going to do it the longer format now. So let's save that, And let's just make sure that we are actually getting an output here. So the way that we can do that is we can output that content that's been picked up here within these A and B variables and place them and output them within our form values. So let's go over to the form, go down to here, and we're going to add another form group. And this form group is going to ask for an input value. So maybe I'll take this one up here and just before the submit button, and it's going to ask that security question to make our form a little bit more secure. And then these values are dynamically generated from our PHP. So let's give it a name for, and we'll do secure check. So we'll give it a name of secure check and attach that ID and the name value, and let's skip that over there, and we need to, so we're going to check to see if it's blank. Answer the question above. So now we need to output a question. So we're going to output a question here within that label section. So let's set up our PHP, and we can echo out the value. So echo essentially just prints it out on the screen. There is a short form for doing this as well within PHP, but for the purpose of this lesson, we're just going to keep it within that long format. So what I want to do is take the value of A, add that in there, and with PHP to join together different string values, we use the period. So we're going to be adding, so we'll use the plus sign there. And so the value of session A plus the value of session B. And essentially, this is what's going to get output within our area there. And then whenever we've finished our statement, we just close that off with a semicolon and then a question mark with the bracket there. So let's take a look and see how this turns out. So now we've got an unidentified value, so we need to make sure that we initiate that value. But over here is where we've created that question. So we've got 6 plus 21, and the first time that the web page loads, if there's no sessions available, then it generates random numbers. But the reason that we did that check there at the top is to make sure that we get same values coming in there. So let's take a look at that and see what's happening here, why it's not adding in and it's not storing those session values. So going all the way up here to the top, and so we're not actually setting a value for sec value. So maybe we could set something, but so maybe we want to set a value to check to see if A exists or something like that. And that will ensure that once A is set, it's not going to change that value. And also maybe we need to start with a 1 instead of a 0. So that was just a couple things there that we just needed to make sure that we're able to set. And let's save that and go back out and refresh it. So now when we refresh it, so that error's gone. Now when I refresh it, we're staying at 34 and 21. So the user wouldn't know a difference here that what we've just done and what we've updated, because whenever they go to the page source, the server content is not visible to them, and all they see is that we've got these numbers here within our HTML. So now essentially we are ready to move on to the next part where we're actually going to hide these values. We'll add in some more styling to the form, and then I'll show you how we can pick up these values, retrieve the values using PHP, and check to make sure that everything is valid, and add in the mail function. So all of this is coming up in the next set of lessons.